Episode 13 of Purpenthicity will analyze the question of responsibility, specifically in the context of your individual purpose and the world you wish to create for all people. This episode is unique in that we'll be joined by University of Maryland graduate and Oakland Police Department officer Isaac Goins, who is going to share his unique perspective on the dynamic of being a Black police officer in the United States. Thank you and enjoy the show. Welcome to Purpenthicity, a podcast where myself, Austin Walker, and my partner, Derek Cahill, discuss and dissect the purpose of excellence in one's life. Our goal is to help you find your path towards a purposeful existence. We'll do this by sharing our deep life experiences along with pragmatic approaches to help you realize that changing your life starts by living your life on purpose.
Derek, welcome back. Welcome back to the show, man.
Let's go.
Purpenthicity, episode 13.
We've come a long way, Austin. Woot, woot. Hold on, what? Skirt!
No, it's your.
Yerd!
I'm going to work on that with you. We're going to take some time over this summer to work on, your call.
My yerd!
Yeah, but I respect you for doing it and for being in here with me, man.
I'm leaning in, Austin. I'm leaning in.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so funny. 13th episode. Gotta say, man, I'm happy of what we've done, what we've created so far. We were actually talking during a planning episode, just kind of given the social unrest going on in our country. We thought it was kind of amusing that the 13th episode kind of like aligns on, we're recording on Juneteenth, and there was also like, the 13th Amendment.
Dude,
and, yeah.
I didn't even connect we're recording on Juneteenth and episode 13 and on
the 13th
like,
Amendment. Yeah,
so Jesus?
No, it's pretty on target. And look, really coming off the coattails of our last podcast, episode 12, Take a Stand, Use Your Voice. I mean, certainly the racial climate in our country is something that's still top of mind for a lot of people. And it's something that we're going to be continuing the conversation, but in a much different lens today. So we have a few updates before we really dive into the bulk of the content today. But today's episode is entitled Responsibility in Creation. And we're going to really be taking a holistic look at what are each of our responsibilities in whatever it is that we wish to create within our world. So we'll talk a little bit about this from an individual perspective, from groups of people, and then from large masses of people, like, nations and states, because we all have responsibilities. And I think particularly if we're looking at the racial biases and the systemic racism that I think everybody's been dealing with, we all have individual responsibilities in eliminating those biases and creating a plane for equality for all. So we're excited for the content today. But quick few updates before we really dive into the bulk of it. Derek, you want to talk a little bit about our summer break?
I would love to, Austin. Thank you.
Okay.
So in the spirit of creativity and where we want to take the rest of the podcast and from a strategic perspective, we're going to take maybe 6 to 8 weeks of non-creation summer break, but rest assured we'll still be putting out, we have a ton of unreleased content and promos, so we'll stay live on social media. I'm sure we'll pop into lives here and there as well, but as of the release of this episode, we're going to take probably 6 to 8 weeks. We'll probably release our next episode August 16th. That's a Sunday in August, just to give us a chance to recuperate and make sure that we're aligning with you guys in the most appropriate content that is most consumable and going to drive the biggest impact.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. Again, opportunity just to really reset for a strong back half of the year in our inaugural Purpenthicity year. Yeah,
strong
right?
back half of the year, dude.
Oh yeah, no, it's going to be awesome.
Results, baby.
Not to be too much of a tease, but we've got some big things coming. So
we do.
What we'd encourage is to get caught up. We've got 13 episodes now on a variety of topics, and we're kind of looking at these first 13 as really kind of the fundamentals of what we're really going to be discussing and continuing to dissect, for as ever long as we continue to do Purpenthicity, which, what would be
Just
decades
forever.
at this point?
Yeah, probably
Decade.
until I'm 95 years old.
Yeah,
You'll actually hear the beep
Yeah.
in the
Well, maybe
background of the final
Landon and
recording.
then, little Austin one
We'll
day will
pass this
continue. Who
off.
knows? Who knows? We're talking
My
generational.
great-great-grandpappy started this podcast.
No, we've got options. But no,
Yeah,
we're excited for that.
yeah.
And one of the things that you also know is a little bit different about today's podcast, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is that we're also introducing an interviewee into the fold.
Very cool.
Yeah, we have Isaac Goins, who was one of my teammates at the University of Maryland, who's actually a police officer in Richmond, California, or actually in Oakland now. And he has a really, really profound story about the dynamics of, being an African American, and also his responsibilities to the shield and to the badge as a police officer. And amidst that, everything's been going on in our country. Some of his distinguished shares, his perspectives are really eye-opening. And I think we have a really grounding conversation in race relations, and ultimately what are each of our responsibilities, and really progressing together as a united country moving forward. So really compelling stuff. And yeah, Isaac, did I miss anything with the background there? Anything else you'd like to add on?
Hi, what's up? Hey, first of all, thanks for having me. For the University of Maryland thing, I think that you left right before I came. So
Yeah.
I don't remember being on the same field as you, but I remember seeing you as you graduated and stuff like that. So I think we just overlapped.
Did you come the winter before?
Yeah, so I came in January of 2012.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense, because I left December 11th. Because I remember seeing you around.
Yeah.
And, DB, DB stick together, right?
Yeah. I remember seeing you, but it just wasn't like we weren't never on the same field. But I always knew you were good people from talking to people on the team like JJ and stuff like that.
Excellent, man. Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Did you have something else that you were going to share too?
No. So just to be more specific, I'm a police officer in Oakland, California, and I've been an officer for 3.5 years.
Excellent, man. Excellent. I think first off, acknowledge you for your service, man. There's certainly been a lot of discussion around policing in our country. And Derek and I have even talked about this in our last podcast, that there's been such a light shown on the negativity around policing. And, my personal views is that there are some bad eggs, but those bad eggs or bad individuals are in the minority. And that there are a lot of really great police officers who are protecting and serving, who are in our community, that I think are kind of getting lumped into this bad policing stereotype. So not to take any light off of the reform or change that does need to happen, but look, man, I couldn't imagine doing what you do. So again, just kind of want to acknowledge you for your service.
Hey, man, I appreciate that. Like you said, it's the best of times and the worst of times to be a police officer right now, with the riots and the looting and the police brutality. I mean, there's a big history of police brutality in the inner city community, which I understand. So, I'm just here to hopefully have a good conversation about that. We can, talk about anything you want to.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think we're talking about, our theme today is responsibility. What is the responsibility each of us have in creating the world that we want to live in? And so I think all eyes are on the racial inequalities in our country right now. So perhaps is a great area. I'd love your perspective on just like, what is your just responsibility, as an officer first and foremost, and then we'll broach into the race element of that once we have that established.
Sure. Strictly as a police officer, my responsibility is to protect and serve. That's a very cliche term, and people use it all the time. But what that means to me is I'm there for protecting life. If anybody needs anything, I'm there for them. I'm there to protect property. If somebody has their stuff stolen, it's my responsibility to do the best I can to get it back. Where it gets kind of tricky is the mentality of community first and identifying with the community. So if I look at everybody as equal, I'm not going to want to harm the community. So there's times where we have to use force. But before I use force, I consider everything that could go wrong if I use force. Specifically in the police department, they ask us to de-escalate a lot of situations. We start off having to talk to people, you know, if the gap is very important. If that doesn't work, then we escalate to a level 4 use of force, which is baton, or we, you know, might have to put hands on somebody. Then we escalate to maybe a taser or you know, pepper spray or something like that. Then if it escalates, then we point our gun, and then if it escalates from there, then we have to end up using lethal force. But there's a whole hierarchy. It doesn't just jump from okay, I'm talking to you now, I have to use a gun. So my responsibility is to protect life. I don't take that lightly. I think that's a huge responsibility as a police officer, and I think that what I'm doing right now is a very honorable job, even though there's a lot of scrutiny in it, and you know, it's just tough sometimes. But you know, I'm willing to help the community out when we can.
That's a beautiful share. I think what really jumps out to me in that is protecting life in terms of one of the principal responsibilities. And I thought it was also an important distinction that you made around almost like the hierarchy of steps that has to come if a situation does escalate before lethal force is even considered.
Yeah.
So, I mean, certainly that's the topic right now that's very prevalent in our country. I mean, you're looking at the George Floyd situation where, what was it, Officer Derek Chauvin, I believe his last name was had his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 49 seconds. So some argue maybe because that wasn't, you know, a firearm, that, you know, it wasn't lethal force, where we obviously know he passed away from that. Or even, you know, Rayshard Brooks just earlier last week. So I'd be curious, you know, your perception, particularly, you know, as a black man here, when you see this unnecessary force being applied to people who look at you, with kind of the balance of, you know, as a cop, I understand in theory, lethal force is only supposed to happen, you know, if my life is truly in danger, versus, you know, is this the appropriate means for this particular situation?
So are we talking about specifically Rayshard Brooks, or are we talking about George Floyd?
Well,
or are we talking about all
I think they are two pretty different scenarios. How did you view Rayshard Brooks as a police officer?
Rayshard Brooks. So I guess the facts were he was sleeping in the drive-thru of a Wendy's. First officer came up, and I guess he had him pull over. Then another officer came up and got him out the car and did the breathalyzer. He was over the limit, tried to put him in handcuffs. He shook him, took the taser, took off running. The officer shot him in the back twice. I think that situation is a lot less cut and dry as a George Floyd situation. I think that if somebody's running away, we got to think about the agency of the crime. If they're fleeing away, a lot of times every use of force that we use is going off of a case that happened in Arizona. I believe it was called Graham v. Connor. It's the severity of the crime, active resistance, maybe you have means to hurt you. All those things have to be weighed in a short amount of time. So in this situation, he's fleeing. Maybe you have means to hurt you. You got a taser, but he's running away. I don't think he's going to hurt you with that taser. So I think in this situation, it wouldn't be best for that officer to shoot him in the back. But I also understand these situations happen fast. I see you play football, so I equate it to playing cornerback, guarding a receiver. Okay, he's breaking down. He's putting his hand up. He turns around. He catches the ball. It happens that fast. So if you're not prepared to handle that situation that fast, you might react the wrong way. I've been in situations to where things happen super fast. And you got to react, and then not only you have to react, you got to write the report exactly how it happened. Mm-hmm. So there's certain situations that it's easy to Monday night quarterback it, meaning that we could come back and talk about it like this, but at the time it's damn hard. It's damn hard. So with the George Floyd situation, I think that's cut and dry. We all know that, you know, it was wrong, and it was no excuse for that, because 8 minutes and 46 seconds is just ridiculous. So I think there's two different cases and there's two different ways to look at that.
Isaac, can I ask you a question of how do you differentiate the worlds that you live in, right? Because like as a police officer, I'm sure there's like that fraternal brotherhood of, you know, you've got to, you know, stand behind your brothers and sisters in blue. And to your point right now, it's like comparing these situations to football. Things happen in a snap. I think it's really difficult to correlate that to life, because when you're shooting someone, it's like, oh, that was a rough one. And then the world that you live in as a black man, where you're seeing the George Floyd situation, do you feel like you can voice your opinion, or do you feel like both sides of these coins are looking for you to be on only their side?
So that's a good question. I think that as a black man, when I see all this stuff, I'm just as shocked as everybody else. Every policy is different throughout the nation. Stuff that they can do in Minneapolis or Atlanta, we might not be able to do. I know we can't put our knee on anybody's neck. We can't use we can't use a chokehold. We can't do stuff like that. And I know we for sure can't shoot anybody when they're running away. So I look at these things and think like, wow, that's messed up. Like they're able to do that. But I think when people look at the situation, they say, okay, somebody in Atlanta is doing something that somebody in Oakland is doing, and somebody in Oakland is doing something that somebody in Seattle is doing. It's all encompassed together. So to answer your question, the first part of your question, I'm very shocked and upset that the officers would do that. And are people asking me from the police department to be on their side, and people from the black community asking me on their side? I think I've got that for sure, especially from the black community. I've been on the front lines of those riots, and with my riot gear, with my hat on, and I've had people call me all type of names, Uncle Tom. You know, you're on the wrong side of things. So it definitely can get to you, but I don't take it personal, because I know there's been a lot of brutality and trauma in the community. It's not me. It's a knock on the bag. It's not me, because I know what I'm doing. So people just need to vent sometimes, and there is systemic racism, and it's valid. So I'm not gonna make it seem like it's not valid. So I don't take it too personal. I know what I'm doing, so I know that I'm making a change. So I don't take any of it personal.
You know, Isaac, that's a really interesting example. You talked about, you know, being in the riot gear and, you know, being of service, to the protests that are going on, and even just some of the names that you'll be called, and Uncle Tom. And again, I imagine strictly just because of the color of your skin. They don't know what your stance is or what your beliefs are. So what do you see as your responsibility in like educating or bringing awareness to some of these biases, or even just like sharing your personal views on it, as you do have to live with, certainly both being a police officer and then of course, a black man in our country?
Yeah. So, what's my responsibility? Can I share a quick story about something that happened last week in the riots?
Hell yes.
So,
yeah.
So, we're on the front lines. I'm in the very front. The protest is pretty peaceful, and all of a sudden, everybody in the crowd just takes a knee, and they say, "Police, we want to see you guys, with us. We want to see solidarity, so we want you guys to take a knee." And our lieutenant, he says he sees this, and he sees that people might want to take a knee, so he says, if you guys want to take a knee with the crowd, we're not going to hold it against you. So after a while, nobody took a knee, and I probably say after 30, 45 seconds, it was one person that took a knee, and it was a black female. And long story short, I didn't end up taking a knee, and here's why. At the time, I think that throughout the whole nation, there's been a whole lot of people taking knees, and nothing has been changing after that. So at the time, it seemed like it was for show. It seemed like it wasn't genuine. I think a lot of people can do a lot of things on the exterior to show that they're for the movement. But me personally, I'm not really for the cameras and the snapshot. I'm for actually going in, getting my hands dirty, and working with these kids and working towards a problem. So to answer your question, Austin, what's my responsibility? I'm in here. I have a mindset of community first. So it's my responsibility as a black man, as a black officer, to do to do the job to the best of my abilities. And with this OK program, teach these guys leadership skills, teach them how to interact with the police officers, teach them stuff that specifically Black men are going through. We're getting incarcerated at a higher rate than anybody else, and we're getting killed at a higher rate than anybody else. So that's my responsibility. I'm not trying to do it for show. And I want to be authentic when I do something and say something that I'm going to do for the community. I don't knock any officer that's taking a knee on the front lines, but to me, it just don't seem too genuine when we take a knee and we go back to doing our job like nothing has changed, you know? So I hope that answers the question. I try to, give you a different analogy.
No, that's great. And Derek, this even kind of goes back to what we were talking about, is that everybody has a different way to use their voice or take their stance, right? So, I mean, what I heard, out of Isaac's story, it's just like, hey, my way of taking a stance wasn't taking a knee. My stance was actually doing action and working with the kids in part of my youth program. Whereas perhaps Derek and I, what our platform may be to get on our podcast and have these conversations. Or for somebody else, it might be a very difficult conversation with a loved one or somebody that they run to at the grocery store. I think, at least from my perspective, the bigger thing is that a stance is being made. So I think that's a really interesting share, and I appreciate you elaborating a little bit on that.
One perspective, Isaac. I think I heard it almost from a different lens. Is like I hear the genuineness and the reason you didn't kneel. But if I put myself in the perspective of all those protesters, I don't know if they're looking at you as necessarily a Black police officer, maybe just a police officer, especially in the status of the country. Where do you think that it would have sent a stronger message to the group of people, whether you felt like it was an empty message or not? They obviously wanted to see that message shown from the people that are supposed to protect them, for your whole squad to take a knee with them. I can see the perspective where they see you, regardless of color of skin, not taking a knee, and the message that could send is like, this guy doesn't care about what we're doing. Even though deeply internally that's not what you feel, but they will never know that.
Yeah, so I think that it's nothing wrong with taking a knee. There wouldn't be any negative to taking a knee. I think that maybe it might have made people feel good. Just to meet and personally, like it didn't feel real. It didn't feel real, and it didn't feel authentic to me. But there wasn't anything wrong with taking a knee. I mean, the person that took a knee, that was a Black female officer. I don't knock her because maybe she doesn't have that outlet that I have with these kids to do that. So this might have been her only opportunity to show the community what she's about. So to answer your question, I think that it for sure it could have gave them moral. Oh yeah, the police are with us, and they could have felt good. I just didn't feel that it was making a change of the system and how the Black community is being treated at that moment. So I didn't feel the need to do it.
Derek, I think that's an interesting point, because we preach here in doing things based and rooted in authenticity. And it's almost, even in the example that you just kind of shared, almost just saying, well, doing something even though you're doing it because of how somebody else is going to respond on it based off of like how you feel towards the situation.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting because there's a number of ways to look at it, right? Like I agree with like your line of thinking, but
it's odd, Austin, because like in this, the reason that's sparked in me, and it's a little bit of a challenging perspective that I have with it, is like when you suit up in that police gear, I feel like a little bit of Isaac doesn't get to play, right? Because you're not Isaac in that moment. You're a representative of the Oakland Police Department. And that's what the people were looking at. They weren't looking at Isaac and what Isaac cares about. They need to see the police force unify, right? So that was the reason I asked this. Is like more so to just offer the different perspective of like, obviously, me and Austin have the privilege of getting to talk to you and learn about the OK program and hear about what you really care about. But if you look at the audience of thousands, they saw a man in blue that didn't kneel. And I know when those people walked away, if only one person kneeled, I think that says a lot on behalf of the Oakland Police Department in regard to what those people wanted to see.
That's a very interesting point. But you're absolutely right. It's when I put on that uniform, I don't represent just myself. And like I said before, I definitely could have taken a knee. And looking back, it definitely wouldn't have hurt. But I mean, at the time, it didn't feel real. It didn't feel real. And we definitely do need to amend the community and police relations. I just feel like there's other ways to go about it besides taking a knee, because, for example, you could be the most racist officer and take a knee and then get back up and do what you were doing before. But the people think that you're for them, you know? So, and it's kind of been watered down throughout the nation. Everybody's taking a knee. It was popular when Kaepernick was doing it, and, you know, the movement was strong, and, you know, people were gaining awareness, so people were upset about it, you know? But I feel like everybody's taking a knee for political reasons, for the camera, for, you know, fame, whatever, you know? It's a lot of people just doing things.
Yeah. I look at it almost like I would want it to be harder to blend in as a racist. And I can see, like, if the majority of the police force is still standing, it's really easy to blend in. Whereas if you need to take the knee, now that becomes, and I know we're talking about something so specific as taking a knee, which I agree, like, are there more meaningful ways to promote change? But if everyone knees, it starts becoming oh, you're standing, we see you, versus the other way around where the couple people that are kneeling, there's a few of you that care. I'd rather make it really friggin' hard for the person that doesn't care about the movement to have to blend in, so it's
Right.
easier to find them.
Right, I get your point.
You know, I like the general theme because we are, at the end of the day, talking about what a solution looks like. I do want to draw back to a point that you said earlier that really stuck out to me. You kind of mentioned it, likened it to a football analogy. When that ball's in the air and you're looking to make a play on the ball, it's a split-second decision. And you put yourself in to be successful through your preparation and through your training. So it makes me think, you know, how are officers being trained for these moments? Because again, when you are an officer, you do have the right to carry a firearm. And at the end of the day, I mean, you have the authority to basically say in certain situations if somebody lives or dies. So I'd be curious of your perspective. You know, what is the police training like today as it relates to these specific visceral life or death moments? And maybe in a follow-on, what do you think needs to change to better equip officers for these type of situations?
Okay, so I could speak for Oakland PD. I wanted to emphasize the fact that what we do here might be different in 3 cities over to where I'm at. It'll be different in PG County, so it's all different. So Oakland PD, my academy was about 7 months long, and my field training program was about 4 months long. In the academy, we learned a series of, you know, what the law is, defensive tactics, you know, how to, you know, control somebody without, you know, using the force that we're allowed to use. We also learn firearm safety, you know, what we have to, you know, before we point our gun at somebody, we got to know the backdrop. We got to be accountable for every bullet we shoot. And we got to know the severity of the crime. We have to know all that. We also have to learn community relations, like what the community's like, the history behind the city. Like, we have to learn all that. So with that said, when we go to the field training program after we graduate from the academy, that's when everything gets real. Everything I learned in the academy was just the basics. I ain't gonna lie. The first week I went out to the streets, it was a whole different game, because it's easy when you're in the background, you know, learning it from a student standpoint. But when you're on the streets and things happen like this, that's when, you know, it gets real. And for an example, I had a situation with I was riding down the street, and some lady flagged me down. She said, help me, this guy has a gun. And I looked on the sidewalk, and it was a black guy. He was about 20 years old. He looked like he could be me. So I was like, let me just low key this, because this guy, he could be me. I don't want to just pull my gun on him and you know, do too much, call the scene. So I walk over to him and I say, sir, she's making allegations of you having a gun. Do you have a gun on you? And he says no, but when he says this, he puts his foot at a 45-degree angle as if he's trying to hide something. So long story short, we ended up handcuffing this guy. He ended up having 2 guns on him, a shotgun in his waistband and another Glock in the back of his, by his hip, his right back hip. And that just kind of changed my perspective too, because, you know, as much as I want to give everybody a chance, it's still criminals out here. It's still people out here that are dangerous. So finding the balance of that is very interesting as a black officer, because you can't stereotype everybody, but at the same time, you know that there's crime being done. So I know I kind of went on a tangent, bro, but
Oh.
long story short, man, as far as our training processes, we learn in the academy, but when we get on the streets, it's a different game because it's so much faster and things are real. Your life is in danger, people's lives are in danger, and you have to react fast. But I do think, you know, there could be more training, but I think that it would be a whole lot better if we had people from the community policing the community. Because I think we have a lot of misunderstandings when people that aren't from the community come in and they're trying to police people who they've been taught their whole life to be dangerous or to be violent. And they automatically have that bias coming in like, oh, all black people are like this or all Hispanic people are like this. And then we have something where they might feel like their life is in danger where I don't feel like my life is in danger because I can identify with them. So to answer your question, I think that we need to have more people from the community policing the community. Police your own community.
Austin, I think we've been chatting for like 30 minutes here. I would love to introduce a small pivot about white people. And like how, from you guys' perspective, what's my responsibility in regard to like the systemic racism, the way, just that in general, like what are you guys' raw thoughts? Like what would you say to me in regard to what you're feeling?
Isaac, how about you take a shot at this first? I'd be curious of your perspective as well.
It's a tough question, man. There's a lot going on, and I think that it's hard for me to just say I want white people to feel sorry for black people, but I just think acknowledging, you know, how the system is set up and how a lot of people of color, you know, they have to take. It's a lot harder for them to come up than it is for, you know, somebody of white descent to come up, as far as, you know, the broken families, the drug system, the school system. If you don't have money, which a lot of times it's black people or Hispanic people, it's a lot harder. So I think that we have to acknowledge that. I think a lot of people who grew up in, you know, privileged situations, they just kind of don't acknowledge it. They just kind of like, oh, well, you know, it is what it is. You know, it's ghetto over there, or they're hood rats over there, you know, as opposed to actually understanding, you know, they didn't have no choice but to live up there. They grew up there, and they didn't ask to be there, but they're there. You know, they're doing the best they can to kind of try to come up. So I think just acknowledging it and, you know, having talks like this, man, I think this is great. I think, you know, having conversations with me and other people can definitely open your mindset to other things.
I remember when the George Floyd thing happened, I called Austin and I was like, dude, what am I allowed to say? Like, cause I was mad. If you listen to podcast 12, I think it was, like I got fired up, and it was before that podcast was actually compelled by the conversation. I think that I was like, what do I do here? Like, if I make a post about it, do I just look like some pompous white guy that wants to take control of the narrative? What do I say? Cause that's like uncomfortability I had. It's like, I don't want to say something and people look at me like you're an idiot, or like, what, sit the fuck down. This isn't your story. This isn't your responsibility. So it is helpful for you to say that to me, Isaac, like, cause I think that, you know, from like a prejudice perspective, like I grew up not great, right? I grew up in a household with domestic violence and drugs, and I think I represent like a smaller portion that can get their shit together. But on the other side, some of the words you just mentioned, like I think you said like the word hood or something like that, or like where people are raised, like I'm afraid to like go into those places. And it's funny, like I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, the Killer Mike that I've been watching on Netflix, like even that weird Netflix show is helping me like break down that perspective I have of like, you think of like Crips and Bloods, like he broke it down to like the Hells Angels sell t-shirts on Amazon, and you think the Hells Angels, that's a gang. It's just a white gang, right? And he's talking to these members of Crips and Bloods, and as they're communicating, I don't see anything different from just normal people, right? Like they're just like, they care about their family, they go to church, they have friends, they like to have fun. But I feel like the country's like generalized black gangs and the hood and the ghetto, and all you ever hear about is the bad stuff that goes on there. And it's like, in my head, like as I'm watching this Killer Mike show, it's like I'd love to just go like meet a large gang of Crips, talk to them, but it's like that'd be terrifying. Like even saying it here, I'm like, oh, I don't really, Derek. What if they whoop your ass or something? But it just says like even the deep down in me of like it scares me, and it's like, how do I break that? How do I break that down? Because when you think about Crips, I think, You think about a group of black guys, right? So then how do I differentiate any group of black men that isn't correlated to a gang? How do I not that you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's like a brain thing that I have.
Yeah, it gets deep, man. It gets deep, bro. It's a whole psychological, war that we've been dealing with for years, man. I mean, I feel like if we want to go deep with this thing, man, like when you think of beauty, you don't think of black women. We don't. When you look on magazine, you don't look at puffy hair, afro. You think of blonde hair, brunette hair, colorful eyes, white skin or light skin, and that has effect not only on white people but also the black community, because they feel like they need to get a weave now because they not.
Yes.
It gets deep, bro, and then I ain't gonna go too deep with you, bro, but yeah, just think of that's the perfect example of how the psychological it affects you guys, but it also affects the black community because they're feeling like they're not worthy because nobody's showing them love and nobody's giving them help.
I mean, it's systemic. I mean, that's the greatest way to categorize this as an umbrella term. I mean, when you're talking about like, okay, well, why do I think of like black gangs in a certain light versus white gangs? Well, where are you getting this information from? Likely a media outlet, right? Well, who is making decisions?
Or movies, or TV shows, or the news.
But who is making these movies, TVs, news? I mean, a lot of these major corporations are owned by white people or not people of color. There's a tremendous disparity. I mean, I think if you want to look at one of the greatest examples of the racial inequality in our country is in wealth. I mean, if you look at the major corporations of our organ, you know what? A great way to look at this is there's 32 teams in the National Basketball Association where 65% of their players are African American, and we have one black owner. And that's in the sports realm, where African Americans have typically had a stronger hold than in other industries. You're looking about corporate America, you want to talk about Hollywood, you want to talk about newspapers, you want to talk about TV stations, you want to talk about banking, you want to talk about technology. I mean, these are all organizations that have been founded and have been grown primarily through white people. So when you're talking about like where do these perceptions come from, it come from a number of different places in everything that we consume. So I think your original question was, hey, like, what can I do as a white person to be a part of the solution? And I agree with Isaac, was like, you have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge is that there is a different experience for somebody, Derek, who looks like me versus for somebody who looks like you. Widespread. But I think in order to acknowledge, you have to first be willing to like listen. Mm-hmm. And I've seen personally in my experience a lot of pushback from people where I will share some element about my unique black experience, and someone will look for the first thing that doesn't correlate to their experience. Oh, well, my parents didn't have generational wealth, so you must be wrong. Or I'm the first person in my family to go to college, so white privilege can't be a thing. And I think it's really interesting in talking about bringing awareness to that is to that show that hey, that there is a difference. And what we're really asking, I think, from Black people as a marginalized people within our country is: are you willing to listen? And are you willing to acknowledge? Are you willing to see us and to hear us? And in line with our podcast message, which is why I think this is so important that we have conversations with someone like Isaac, is that every person's voice matters. Your stance matters. And the biggest thing that I think that we can be doing as a community and as a people is asking people to stand up and to use their voice and to call out racist or discriminatory behavior. I think there's a misconception that, hey, if I want to create this world, I have to have this grand declaration, or I have to do this quote unquote big thing to show that I'm a part of the solution, where the simplest things like having the conversation can be some that can be the most profound.
Now, I agree. If everybody does their part, I feel like things would change.
So what is that though, right? Like, so Austin, you said like listen and acknowledge. I feel now more than ever that I'm listening and acknowledging, right? Like I'm listening and I'm acknowledging, like, I've never seen the problem as big as I see it now, right? Like, because it's so loud, right?
Mhm.
Which is a good thing. But how do I do that at scale? Like, how does listening and understanding work? Like, how do things get better that way?
Well, I think everybody's situation is unique to them. Like me in particular, I think I have a situation to where I can be on the front lines with these boys. I work with about 70 to 75 boys, and I'm dealing with them. And every Monday through Thursday when I go to work, I pull up on their house and we have conversations about the George Floyd situation. How can we solve this? How do you feel like if you was getting pulled over by a police officer, how would you act? Stuff like that. For you have a podcast, you have friends. I'm pretty sure you could educate them. Everybody has a different lane, and everybody should use their lane to be able to create awareness and make their circle aware of what's going on. I think if everybody does that to their circle, then I think that in a broad scale, we'll be creating some type of change. So I can't necessarily tell you what to do, but I think this podcast is great, man.
Well, first off, thank you. And secondly, I mean, even liking it back to our theme today, like, what's your responsibility as a father, Derek? Like, if I ask you that question, I'm sure there's a few things that inherently come to mind.
Yeah.
Instill values in my children, make sure that they're safe, they're protected. But is one of your responsibilities to talk to your, white kids about race relations and how to not see that as they grow up? I think when we're talking about bringing awareness, acknowledging, or what can you do, again, it's just like, how are you living and engaging in your day to day? How are you engaging with your kids? Are you being an example for your
Mhm.
kids to look at you so that when you have the conversation with them, it's a no brainer versus, well, my dad's saying me one thing, but he's acting differently. It's, again, I think, and Derek, you and I, we've been going back and forth
Yeah.
with this. I think we look at, like, what is the big solution? And I think some people want to say, oh, well, we need a new president. Once we have the new president, we're going to be good. Which, again, it's a systemic problem. There's not one easy solution that's going to undo 400 years of oppression.
Right.
But what we all can do is control how we engage in life and having the conversations. And you even said it in your share, Derek. You said, I don't think I've ever before looked and seen and recognized it's as big as a problem as it is today. So then, I think the question is, even, you as our, the white person in this particular situation is like, what are you going to do? I'd be curious to, like, what's your answer? Like, how do you think that, what do you can do to help create a world of equality?
I kind of take shots, man. Like, this month with our chocolate company, we're giving all of our profits that Colin Kaepernick Foundation. I'll get you next time, Isaac, on the OK program. But, like, because that's all I know how to do is, like, find programs. Like, I looked up programs that support minority and like Black youth to do something similar to what you're doing. I think is what the Colin Kaepernick Foundation does is helps grow people to, like, get out of their environment or, like, learn how to change their environment, which I love too. But it's also, like, I see a huge responsibility on the white side too, which is, like, you can't I don't know. I'm going to speak broadly here. Like, white people, let's say, created that situation through, like, what we talked about, Austin, with, like, redlining, where people could get home loans. And we created the socioeconomically depressed areas that exist today. So it's not about educating them how to be better. Like, to your point, Austin, you said, if you and I both got pulled over, you have to change the way you behave to make sure that you are on your best behavior. And I don't think that's right. Like, I think we should be teaching police officers how to change their behavior and how they approach people, while, sure, the other side can, I don't know, is their opportunity to learn how to behave better to the police. But I think it's also been groomed as a young Black man to be afraid from police. Like, look at what happens on TV. Look what happens when the news gets reported. Like, I'd be fucking terrified. Austin, you told me you don't even like to drive in the South. Like, when you said that to me, my mind exploded. Like, I can't even imagine what that's like. I can't imagine what it's like, and I can't say anything about what it's like. But what you know me, I'm a dreamer, dude. Like, I try to think of the big things. Like, I'll take it back even to what I said to you, Isaac, about taking the knee. It's like, I'm a big believer of, you're on stage every single day. And
Sure.
I want to have a harder time. I want to have an easier time finding the person that doesn't believe that change needs to happen, rather than have good people try to blend into the mass. Because I feel like that's kind of what it is. I feel like there is a definite divide on the side of the police force. Like even in my own heart, when I look at the was it Rayshard Brooks?
Mhm.
From what I've been groomed learning about police shows, I'm like, well, he did turn around and shoot a taser at that cop, so I can see that. But it's like, what? It's a fucking taser, and there's two of you. You're not going to get killed. There's two
Right.
cops.
And he was
You know?
running away.
And he was running away. So
Yeah.
we could categorize him in like that was a mistake. You shouldn't have shot that cop with a taser. You might get a black eye, something, but like shot in the back. But when I first saw the video, my mind was like, oh, well, he did shoot that taser at the cop. I tried to justify it.
Yeah.
But it's like, how is that justifiable? It'd be like if he threw a rock at him, does he get shot? A little pebble, is that shooting? Is that shooting worthy? If he kicks him, does he get shot? Right? It's like so much needs to change in the way we behave as a people and as large groups. We need to see, like, I know I'm getting way down a rabbit hole here, man, but it's like I think about like the United States military, like if they were ever deployed to stop social unrest, like if I were a soldier, I wouldn't want to do it. I'd be like, nah, these are my people. Not black people, white people, but like my American people. I'm not attacking my American people. And if I was a police officer, like one of the things I talked to Austin about is I wonder how many cops have been party to excessive force but didn't feel like they had the voice to step up and stop it.
Hmm.
Right? Like I'd ask you, you've been in the role for 3.5 years. Have you ever seen something that felt a little too aggressive, but you didn't feel like you had a platform to step up? That should be the other fucking way around. The other way around should be like the person doing the excessive force should look up and feel so tremendously awkward because everyone's like, you better stop that shit right now. That should be the minority. But right now, I feel like the people that want to do the right thing aren't using their voice enough. I'm going to get off the platform
yeah.
here.
Well, I'd like to make a quick observation. I'll throw it to you, Isaac. You just basically shared with us your vision of the solution and what things should be like in our country and how police should be, in this particular example, viewing, racial inequalities. I think prior to this, I'm not sure, and I don't know, I'm not sure if you would have been able to articulate what a solution could have been. Because I don't know if you would have perhaps recognized it as much of a problem as it is today. And I think generally speaking, because of the fact that we are talking about this now, people can now also think about what a solution is. And now people can then also start making changes to create a world where these solutions are prevalent. I mean, the challenge is that there's not one fix. I mean, if you want to talk about what people can do at a large scale, is to be involved in the election process and to know who you are electing as your mayor and your governors and your senators. I mean, look, your mayor and governors, those are the people who pick the police commissioner. And then the values behind the police commissioner, and then the values and the practices that, for example, within policing, that they are stemming within their departments. So there's certainly some bigger blocks here, but I think what you just did there is like your ability to even just to be able to like say, hey, this is what a solution is, I think is something that maybe even a few months ago or a few weeks ago, I'm not sure if you or any other people in our country, particularly people who don't look like Isaac and I, could have been able to do.
To address that point, I think that come out of the academy, man. Not to toot my own horn, I was like top of my class, and I was kind of like supposed to be doing stuff to get the big arrest, be on SWAT team. That's what everybody was thinking that I was going to do, right? But I think that it's obvious, man. I worked when I got cut loose from the field training program. It was obvious working in these tough areas of the communities of how messed up it is. You go down, you see how many people are strung out. You see the heavy homeless population. You see how people are living, and it's kind of like, you gotta take your hat off. Like, what is going on down here? And in my heart, like I couldn't help but, some of these people are hungry and they up all day and night. I wouldn't feel bad about going to McDonald's. I would get them food and make sure that they're taken care of. But every officer, I understand every officer is not doing that. But if you really look and think about how things are done in this society, like it's obvious if you're looking at it. I think everybody's looking at it now because everybody's quarantined. Nobody's going to restaurants. Nobody's going to the club. There's nowhere to go. but to watch the TV, and everybody's seen that plain sight. So I chose to do this OK program, which was very unpopular. And actually people looked at me a certain type of way because they like, what you want to do that for? You want to be a school cop? But it's bigger than that. It was the right thing to do. I could easily do patrol. It wasn't too bad for me, but it is something that needed to be done, because why are we trying to work on these guys and catch these guys after they didn't made up their mind and want to be a criminal? Why don't we just reverse it and help these guys, you know, become productive citizens? And then that's reversing crime, you know, from the back end, you know? So that was something that I thought about, and I made that decision about a year and a half ago. But I think the whole broad scale of everybody in society is opening their eyes, because we're in quarantine. There's nowhere to look but on TV or social media and see what's going on. But it's obvious, man. It's obvious, too obvious.
I think that's a really beautiful account, and appreciate all your examples here, and even just our general conversation today, Isaac. I know for me, it's been really eye-opening to understand your perception, again, walking the line as both a police officer and a Black person in our country, particularly during this time of social unrest. And again, I acknowledge you for, you know, being vulnerable to share your unique story, to try and bring awareness and, you know, acknowledgement to the racial inequalities that exist in our country. As we begin to kind of wrap here, two questions that we ask anybody who comes on, or we will ask anybody who comes on our podcast, really in line of our two major themes here, is what is your purpose and what is your unique superpower? So would you be able to share anything regarding your purpose and superpower?
I think my purpose right now is to in this world to where we have in this world where it's tough to be a police officer and everything is scrutinized, and you know everybody has a microscope on police officers, is my responsibility and my purpose to shine my light as bright as possible, to show love to the community, to be a friendly face out here. It's actually my responsibility to have these conversations with you, because it's community-based policing, and it's not us versus them. So I take it very serious about my, you know, community relations and community policing, because it's like I said, it's not us versus them. It's not a, you know, we're at war with the community. So that's my purpose right now as a Black man, as a Black officer, to do the best I can at my job, and have these conversations and help these guys out in my program. My unique superpower, I think that I'm very adaptable, man. I think that you could put me in any different environment. You could put me around somebody who's racist and I can blend in. I can shake my head, okay. And you could put me in the deepest of hoods and I can blend in over there too. Or the whitest community, or, you know, with political figures, and I can adapt with all these different people. And I read the book of 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah.
You have to, you know, you can think as you want, but you got to be able to play the game. So I'm playing the game, and I'm trying to do my best to change things from the inside out. And that's my unique superpower. And I think that's got me pretty far.
Isaac, is there anywhere that people could go to donate to this OK program? Do you guys take donations? Is it a group that takes that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So we actually have a website. It's if you just search OK program on Google, we have a website. It's been going on since the 1990s. The founder, Deputy Northcross, he started the program, and it's actually throughout the nation. Our headquarters are in Oakland, and we got 2 chapters in Oakland. I honestly think that this could be a big way to solve our problem if we had Black officers doing this around the whole nation, to where we could, you know, mend community relations and teach Black men from a Black officer standpoint of how to deal with the police, the statistics of the police officers, and stuff specifically to Black men, stuff that we deal with, not anybody else. So we also do have Cash App and Venmo. It's OK Program Oakland, and you know, if you feel like you want to do some research on the program, like I said, check out the website. It's been going on for years. Me personally, I have 70 to 75 kids I work with. There's East Oakland chapter. They have about 100 kids. and we do a whole lot of great things in the community. We're on the front lines, and we love to have anybody that wants to be involved, if you're on the West Coast, to be involved in the OK program, because that's how we change things, is take care of our own.
Well, cool. Well, one commitment I'll make: Wicked Bold Chocolate, #July, profits going to the OK program.
Okay.
That's one thing.
That's amazing.
Number two is for our listeners, something that you said, Isaac, something that you also encouraged me to do, Austin, is to do this more, right? When I think, first of all, like, this feels so good to just talk and be able to be vulnerable about some of the things I've felt as a white person. I feel like you guys have also been able to be vulnerable and kind of be honest about how you guys have felt as black men in this country. But what I feel like the country does is you join your big movement, and then those big movements speak for you. And what that turns into is Facebook comments and news articles for 5 minutes, and no individuals are like crossing those lines to meet and have the opportunity to be changed or swayed, because the internet's full of toxicity, right? And when you can just one-off comments, the one thing I'd encourage people to do is get off Facebook comments. Like, stop sharing your opinion in text and start sharing it in voice. Start having one-to-one conversations like this, because I think this is the way to break shit down. It's easy to be a dick on the internet. It's really easy to change your perspective when you're talking to someone, because it requires you to pull that empathy muscle a little bit and be vulnerable. So this was really cool, man. Like, I think this is such a valuable share from you, man, and the courage that you show as a police officer in the country to step up and use your voice. Like, that's, I think, one of the biggest things that we stand for with Purpenthicity is use your voice. It was I think the title of number 12 was just that, use your voice. And I think the more people that we can inspire to step up and share what they feel in an open, collaborative, and safe environment, like, that's the path forward to where we can start minimizing those who don't want to share those different opinions and don't want to change their perspective on where this country needs to go. This right here is step, we'll call it like 1.5. Anything you want to wrap with, Austin?
No, I'd like to wrap and say, I'd like to acknowledge you, Isaac. I mean, it's so admirable to see what you're trying to do and to bridge the gap between the communities, particularly from policing and in the community, to establish stronger relationships, to live in a world really where racial biases aren't informing policing decisions. Like I said, particularly as a man of color, I know there are various different backgrounds and stereotypes that you have to engage with on the day-to-day, man. I know that it's not easy. So again, thank you for sharing your story, for sharing your experiences, to talking about the OK program. And I'd encourage our listeners to do a little bit more research on Isaac, his unique story, and the OK program, to see how they can be a part of the solution. And just generally in wrapping, it doesn't matter how you decide to use your voice. Reinforcing last week's message, it's more important that you do decide to do something and take a stand for the world that you want to be a part of.
Absolutely. And I just want to say thanks for having me on here. Great conversation. Anytime you guys want to have another conversation, it's all good. And I just wanted to reiterate, man, I think if you take anything from what I said, I think it's very important to be able to police the community in which you can identify. If we have more people from the inner city community policing that community, I think that would be great. Oakland is a very diverse city, to where we have all different ethnicities. So we have every different type of cop, as far as ethnicity. So I think that's great. But I think that we would have a whole lot less issues if we had a lot more cops from the community policing the community.
Very cool, man. Thanks for your time, man.
Thanks, Isaac. Take care.
All right.
Later.